Welcome grade 12s. I'm Mrs. Kwangsi from Linkside High School, and I'm so excited to share with you some guidance in preparation for the upcoming exams. Here we can see the format of your exam. It consists of a 3-hour, 200-mark paper which is divided into 5 sections. There are always 10 questions in the tourism paper, each question consistently covering the same topics each year. This breakdown can be found on page 2 of your exam paper. Another element to take note of is the time allocated for each question. This is, however, just a guideline. This slide shows a percentage breakdown for the 3 cognitive levels taken from Bloom's taxonomy. It shows the levels of understanding and learning and how questions will be scaffolded from easier remembering questions to more challenging questions that seek an in-depth answer, such as analyzing a source or applying understanding. Lower order questioning only expects you to recall learned facts. In other words, questions that test your ability to remember. This part of the question paper weighs 30% of the paper, is generally perceived as being easier as no critical thinking questions will be asked. You should be able to get a pass for tourism if you get all these correct. Middle order questions focus on your ability to interpret factual knowledge and rearrange learned material, as well as to apply existing knowledge to new or similar problems. And the higher order questions focus on breaking down elements, making judgments against established criteria, and decision making. Slide 4 shows the type of questions that can be expected under each cognitive level. I'm sure you have noticed the use of action verbs. Each question always starts with an action verb such as name, describe, explain, or compare. Let's look at the next slide for better understanding. Here you will see a more in-depth explanation of what each action verb expects you to do. Let's take a look which of these are mostly used in the tourism exam. Name, state, and give. This requires listing the basic facts without discussion. Example, name the 2 annual marketing events held in Europe, or state one characteristic that makes Icon be world famous. Describe. This requires you to write down the characteristics of something in a logical and well-structured way. The difference between describe and define is that describe means to give a detailed account, and defining would give a general meaning. Example, define the concept core market, or give a description for the following event. Identify. This requires you to identify the essential characteristics of the matter being discussed. Example, using the map, identify the province where this World Heritage Site is located, or identify which pillar is evident in the extract. Explain. This requires you to make clear, state simply so that the reader can understand mere stating of a fact is not enough. Example, explain one reason why the employee feels entitled to a uniform allowance, or explain how the poor conditions of roads can negatively impact on visitor numbers at this attraction. And then calculate. You'll find this in every single paper. This question is used in time zones and currency calculations and requires you to show all steps in your working out. Here are a few exam tips that will assist you during the exam. Read through the whole paper first, whilst you wait for the examiner to give you the go-ahead to begin. You will then make notes that will help trigger your memory as you go through the question paper. Reading the question correctly with understanding will give you the best chance at answering correctly and receiving the maximum marks for each question. Don't forget to check your mark allocation to ensure you are giving enough information. Here is a simple example of how to make sense of the question's objectives. Look for the action verb. What is it asking you to do? Make little notes with keywords. As you go through the paper, add facts as you recall them. Often, other questions in the paper can give guidance. Look at the mark allocation. A mistake learners often make is not reading properly. In this example, at question 4, they are asking the impact on the tourist, and in question 5, the impact for the economy. Be specific when discussing these 2 different elements. Here are some more exam tips to get the best results. Use tourism terminology such as indigenous, flora, and biodiversity. This shows the examiner that you know what you are talking about. Answer in full sentences and paragraphs where asked. Don't assume the examiner knows what you mean, so explain fully what you are meaning to say. Write neatly. Cursive can also be very difficult for examiners to read. There are often yes-no questions in the paper. You must validate the yes or no answer in order to receive any marks. Example, no, they do not have sustainable practices at the accommodation. Remember that grade 10 and 11 work can also reflect in your exams. As mentioned in the beginning, 30% of the exam is lower order questions, so the ability to remember facts. Expect questions on abbreviations such as WHO, IDL, and UTC. Also expect terminology such as the red channel, duty-free shops, and restricted items. Here is the lower order question format to expect in section A. There are always multiple choice questions. Choose the correct word or term. Choose the correct term in brackets and matching column A with column B. Only write the letter unless the question asks for a word. A good idea to do well in this section is to cover the answer options, read the question, think about the answer, and if it is one of the options, go with your gut and use it. Section B, C, D, and E assesses individual topics in more depth, meaning you must give a more comprehensive response as they require higher order thinking skills. In these sections, questions may be based on sources such as maps, graphs, tables, pictures, extracts, case studies, and cartoons, amongst others. This section assesses your knowledge of the content and the ability to demonstrate more complex understanding and problem-solving skills. Expect questions asking you to explain, motivate, substantiate, interpret, apply, reason, and calculate. It is vital to show all steps for the calculations and rounding off answers to 2 decimal places in forex calculations. These sections will often include questions that need paragraph type responses. Question 2. Map work and tour planning. You can expect questions on tour planning, compiling an itinerary and the tour budget, also health and safety, travel documentation, world time zones, and calculations. The time zone map is always given in the question paper and must be used for the interpretation and the understanding of time zones. You do not need to know which countries apply daylight savings time, as you will be told in the question paper. You must understand the impact of time zones and daylight savings time on travel planning and traveling. It is very important to show all calculations, as a mark will be allocated for each step used in the calculations. Please remember also to use the 24-hour clock. Time zone calculations can be asked in various ways. With travel time, there will be a flight involved. Without travel time, such as watching a sporting event on the television or making a phone call. It can also ask you to calculate an arrival time or a departure time. If we look at the calculation, 2.1.1 is a straightforward sum, as it is asking for an arrival time with no travel time, as he is viewing the game on television. Question 2.1.3 is asking for an arrival time including travel time. 2.1.2. This question needs a yes-no response. Remember to validate your response. If we look at the steps of time zone calculations, in step 1, you will find the time zones for the 2 destinations. Include daylight savings time if given. Work out the hour difference between these 2 destinations. At step 2, add or subtract the hours difference, depending on the direction. Work towards the unknown time. In step 3, include any additional information, such as flights and stopovers. Note, step 1 and 2 always works the same way no matter whether you are being asked for arrival time or departure time. If you are asked for a departure time, then you will subtract the hours for flights and stopovers in step 3. If the word sum does not involve travel, then you will only include step 1 and 2. Here is the time zone map you will get in the question paper. Use a highlighter or pen to mark the locations mentioned in the word sum. Look for the number closest to the country's name. If in doubt, look at the shading and link it to the time zone indicators at the top of the page. Remember, for step 2, moving towards the IDL or the east, you add the hours difference to your known time. Moving towards the west, subtract the hours difference from your known time. Here's an example of how to do the time zone calculations. At step 1, we looked at the 2 destinations and found their time zone. Berlin uses daylight savings time. We therefore add 1 hour. Please take note when you do daylight savings time at how the numbers change on the positive GMT side or on the minus GMT side. A +4 will become a +5, but a -4 becomes a -3. In step 2, we took the known time and we worked towards the time we are wanting to know. It was 4 o'clock in Rio. We are moving towards Germany in an easterly direction. Therefore, you add 5 hours. Remember to put the date as well. There was no travel time in this question. In the previous example, there was no travel time included in the sum. Therefore, you would not do step 3. In this example, though, there is flight time. Let's have a look at how we do this. Step 3, if you are asked for an arrival time, then you always add flights and stopovers. If you are asked for a departure time, then you will always subtract the flight and stopover time. If you are given more than 2 destinations, break them up into 2 sums. Example, from the departure point till the end of the stopover or connecting flight, and then a second sum starting from the departure from the airport till the final destination. Regarding tour planning, be familiar with airline terminology such as stopover time, layover time, and the use of a +1 after arrival time, which refers to the next day on an airline schedule. Read up on current global health issues that would affect travel. Know the recommended precautions that must be taken. Our experience with COVID-19 has been a good example of this. In general, health and safety precautions for tourists in terms of unforeseen occurrences must be discussed using current information. Be familiar with the latest documentation required to access travel documents, custom requirements, and the impact these have on international inbound and outbound travel. 2.4.2 is a recurring question found in this section. Jet lag versus jet fatigue. Jet lag is when you cross many time zones and have a physical reaction due to the loss of time, versus jet fatigue, where you are staying within 2 time zones but flying for a long time. So basically, you are tired of sitting for so long. 2.5.2, this question asks you to differentiate between a recommended and a compulsory vaccination, also a question that comes up often. 2.3.1 is another example of a paragraph question. It is good to practice old papers. This question deals with foreign exchange. Use only exchange rates expressed as 1 unit of foreign currency equal to the value in rand. For example, $1 is equal to 13 rand 50. Calculators may be used for the calculations. All calculations must be rounded off to 2 decimals. Show all calculations as marks are still awarded for using the correct equation, even if your answer is wrong. You must know when to use the bank buying rate, the BBR, and bank selling rate, the BSR, when doing the calculations. You must be able to use and interpret a currency rate table to answer questions on Forex. You must also understand the reasons for the fluctuation of the rand against major currencies, and very importantly, the impact this has on international inbound and outbound travel. On the right side of this slide is an example of currency calculations, which are given as word sums. Don't let the details of the story stress you out. You are focusing on the known or amount given in the sum and convert it to the currency that is asked for. Bank buying rate and bank selling rate is usually a big challenge for learners. Memorize the block at the top and you can't go wrong. ZAR, if you're given ZAR in the currency, you divide by the bank selling rate. If you are given foreign currency and you need to convert it to ZAR, you multiply by the bank buying rate. Know what currency which country is using. You must know the US dollar, pound sterling, and euro, which are foreign currencies regularly used in the exams. Note you will only exchange from the ZAR to foreign currency or from foreign currency to ZAR, never between two foreign currencies. At times, only the currencies used in the actual calculations will be in the currency rate sheet provided. It gets trickier when many extra currency options are given, testing your ability to choose the correct one. In the currency table on the right, you will see what equal value would look like. Thus, the higher the rand value, the weaker the rand. The question that asks how a strong rand or weak rand impacts inbound and outbound tourism is always a higher order question. Here you need to think logically. When our rand strengthens, it does not mean that we are stronger than the foreign currency. It just means that we will be more likely to travel overseas and have a stronger buying power than usual. However, foreigners will not come to South Africa as they will get less rands than usual for their currency. A weaker rand means that we are less likely to go overseas due to it being so expensive. But foreigners will come to South Africa as they will get lots of rands for their currency. We have come to the icon section. Please take note that you are only learning these 14 icons. There's no way to predict how this question will be asked, as one icon could be asked or multiple icons in one source, but it is generally source-based. Here the use of maps, case studies, scenarios, or extracts can be seen. This is generally a well-answered section. Be mindful that it is usually also incorporates factors that make a tourism attraction successful. You need to know the full name of the icon, its location, and the reason why it is an icon or attraction. This is an example from a past paper focusing on only one icon, Petra. Take note the use of scaffolding, whereby the questions start with recalling knowledge to discussing, which requires critical thinking and problem solving. At 4.3.3, learners were asked to write a blog about the success of this tourist attraction. Remember to write full sentences and answer what the question asks. Question 5 deals with World Heritage Sites. You must be able to give a description of all 10 South African World Heritage Sites, their locations on a map of South Africa, and how they meet UNESCO's criteria. You must be able to recognize the logo and know the main function and role of UNESCO regarding the World Heritage Sites. You must be able to evaluate the status of World Heritage Sites and, very important, the value of these special sites to South Africa's tourism industry. There are thousands of heritage sites in South Africa, but only 10 of these meet UNESCO's World Heritage criteria, and therefore we have 10 South African World Heritage Sites. The fossil hominid sites may also be referred to as the cradle of humankind. Take note that there are two newer sites that may not be in your textbooks if they are outdated, namely Barberton Makonjwa Mountains and the Kumani Cultural Landscape. As with world icons, the World Heritage Site source can be of an individual World Heritage Site or possibly a map asking questions about a few of them. Read the questions properly. Write the full names of the attractions, otherwise no marks will be awarded. We again see the use of scaffolding where lower order questions are used, such as name and state, and then working towards middle and higher order questions, such as explain, and at 5.3 writing a paragraph. Remember, with paragraphs, there are no bullet points or subheadings. You can expect questions on marketing South Africa as a tourism destination, as well as the role of tourism in marketing South Africa. Understand the concepts, core markets and emerging markets, and also how they relate to marketing South Africa as a tourism destination. Familiarize yourself with tourism's brand image and core business. Pay attention to how South Africa is marketed and where the funding comes from. Be aware of the various platforms South Africa markets itself as a destination of choice on, namely travel trade shows such as the World Travel Market, the ITB in Berlin, the Africa's Travel in Durban, and the Getaway Show. You should become aware also of recent events where South Africa has been marketed, such as the World Expo in Dubai. This extract is from the November 2017 paper. It is a great example to practice the topic as it covers questions on branding and the trade shows. There's also a recurring question about TOMSA's tourism levy and how it assists with marketing South Africa. Let's have a look at the funding process. Tourism businesses such as accommodation, car rental, tourism operators, and travel agents have the optional choice of collecting a 1% levy from tourists. The businesses pay the levies to the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, the TBCSA, who gives it to TOMSA. TOMSA is the administrator of these funds, so TOMSA makes the funds available to Tourism. Tourism uses the funds to market South Africa, both domestically and internationally. Question 7 covers tourism sectors. Questions on professional image in the tourism industry, conditions of employment, and the purpose and value of the code of conduct are found here. Expect a variety of sources. You will be required to interpret and apply the information. You do not need to memorize any legislation. Learners generally pick up easily the wrongdoings in the scenarios, but struggle to give meaningful answers to the higher order questions. Do not just copy and paste from the text unless asked to quote. Rather rephrase in your own words. Focus on terminology such as dress code, hygiene, uniform, and professionalism. The extract on the left side focuses on how a company can show professionalism. The extract on the right requires you to recall facts such as the code of conduct and the employment contract. Know the difference between these two documents. Question 8 covers the 3 pillars of sustainable tourism: corporate social investment in tourism and responsible tourism and tourists. The topic of the 3 pillars of sustainable tourism is challenging for learners. You are expected to apply your knowledge to various given sources, make recommendations, and provide solutions on how to implement the triple bottom line in a tourism business. You must be able to critically evaluate and assess the role of corporate social investment practiced by businesses and organizations. It will be to your advantage to learn some basic examples under each pillar. Here is a quick example of the responsible actions taken by the Wild Coast Sun. You should be clear on the scaffolding approach by now, whereby easier questions are worked up to those that need some deeper thinking. Also consider questions on global warming. You should expect one of two types of questions here. A planned event with a positive outcome, like a sporting event or world summit, or a negative event with a negative outcome, such as a natural disaster, war, or disease outbreak. You can prepare for these by looking at positive and negative consequences of global events. Matrix, we have come to the last question in the paper. Question 10. You must know methods to obtain customer feedback and to measure customer satisfaction. Expect sources such as extracts, pictures, cartoons, and online articles. On the left source, there's one higher order question where you need to use critical thinking, and one lower order question where you must recall a fact. On the other source, the questions are lower order questions. This is always the shortest question in the paper, but is often answered poorly. Read the questions properly. Brainstorm solutions for service delivery problems and why customer complaints are important.